This episode is brought to you by Lexham Press, who publishes books that love the Word, love the faith, and love the Church. Lexham Press was recently acquired by Baker Publishing Group. Our July book of the month is Meeting God in His Means of Grace, How Word, Sacrament, and Prayer Help Us Encounter Christ. You can receive a 30% discount on this title and all previous books of the month by visiting bakerbookhouse.com/pages/Mere Fidelity. You can find that link in our show notes to get 30% off our book of the month from Lexham Press.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Mere Fidelity, a podcast by Mere Orthodoxy, where we think about the Word of God and the world we live in. My name is Derek Rishmawi, and I'll be your host for the day. I am joined by regular cast and crew members Alastair Roberts and Brad East. Good to see you, fellas. So we've had kind of a 2-week break hiatus, and we thought we'd come back with a bang by having a spicy, hot, really actually fairly cold and late take on the Odyssey, because you're really not a take haver unless you've had a take on the Odyssey. I think we're all professional take havers. I don't know if that's like that's a technical term here, but we all qualify. So yeah, Nolan's Odyssey, which is just as a first meta take. I'm not sure we've had a movie discussion yet. We used to rally. We used to lobby Matt for years, and he manfully vetoed us constantly. But Odyssey broke the film embargo discussion here, and I think that
had a novel discussion.
I know, right now.
But it had one, but
Let's
that
do
was
it.
not even on our show. It was.
Hold on, guys. I'm having a meta take. The thing that's fascinating, though, is the fact that this film has provoked this amount of conversation, like across the aisle, across all these different ways. What's fascinating, because like Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man movie just came out this last weekend, and it's set to take like 360 million or some huge opening, right?
The most ever.
Yeah, one of the most ever. Is like, I don't know if adjusted for inflation, that's true. But in terms of cultural discussion, I've seen zero, right? It's a Spider-Man movie, whatever. And I love Spider-Man. Spider-Man's my guy. But the fact that this film has generated so much discussion is in itself discussion worthy. Before we even get to the film, that was one of the first things that stood out to me about the whole phenomenon. But I want to hear you guys. You guys have seen it. What are your, responses? Brad, you wrote up a long response. But if you guys want to kick it, how did you feel about the movie? Give me your feelings, guys. Give me your raw emotions.
Alastair, you first.
Well, I do think it's better to have a colder take on this movie than some of the hot takes that preceded the movie's release. One of the main impressions I had was that the movie really embarrassed many of the people who made premature judgments about it. And whatever your take on it, I think, it was not what some people were setting it up to be.
Alastair, for those of us who don't have social media or know the discourse, could you say what you're talking about?
Okay, yeah. Well, a lot of it was down to casting decisions. Elliot Page, of course, but other situations, the other details of the casting and statements about the use of Wilson's translation. People were just saying this is going to be an extreme so-called woke representation of the Odyssey, and that everything's going to be betrayed about it. And
it's going to be a cultural humiliation ritual.
Got it.
That was the generalized, like, kind of right-wing take. This is going to be this is going to be a woke monstrosity, that sort of thing.
And it's going to completely fail at the box office.
Completely fail.
When I think of Christopher Nolan's work over the last 25 years, woke is the first word that comes to mind.
Well, and what was, that's a whole nother thing is, Dark Knight Returns being one of the most prominent right-wing, or at least small c conservative, anti-Marxist films in the last 25 years. But that whole phenomenon of like, we've got to see things coming, and we have to have a take before the thing even comes out. And sometimes you can see these things coming. There's things that just inevitably are going to happen. But I will admit, I was worried about a couple of things. I was like, oh gosh, is this the first time he's going to fail me? But I'm not. No, not yet. And so I withheld judgment until I experienced it. But what about the film itself? Yeah. So yeah, I agree. I do not think it was that. But what about the film itself? Brad, Alastair, did you guys like it? What was it? Was it good actually, or was it a disappointment on reflection, or what?
My 2 cents, which as Derek alluded to, I finally had to write up as a take haver. I had to give my take, at least to myself. I figured if I was sending messages to friends, I could just collect those messages and put them into a blog post. My meta take on top of Derek and Alastair's both is that like it is good. It is good to wait on these things and not to say what we think 3 seconds after a movie ends on Twitter or whatever. My TLDR was, I liked it, and in many respects, it was thrilling, and the craftsmanship was extraordinary. The music was wonderful. Many performances were great. Many episodes were 10 out of 10, not least among them Circe. But thematically, narratively, artistically, I suppose I don't want to call it a failure, but I think he missed his shot. You can see what he was going for, and it's not just that you can see it, he tells you in the final 15 minutes. He just has characters say out loud the take home message verbatim that he wants you to have. And that is a temptation that Nolan has in some of his writing as the screenwriter for all of his own films, to lay out to make the subtext text. But even if he had shown rather than told at the end, I thought he made 2 or 3 crucial mistakes that wouldn't have made it less Nolan, but would have made it more successful. And I can say more about that in a moment, but I don't actually know where y'all landed. We've not pre-gamed this episode, so I literally don't know what y'all think.
I largely agree with that, but it was, brilliantly executed in many respects, certainly technically. Think of the work and the filming, the use of IMAX throughout was remarkable. Certain scenes really stood out. The Circe scene was amazing. The Cyclops scene was spectacular as well. As a Nolan movie, I was expecting a thoughtful engagement with the source material. It's not my favorite version of the Odyssey. That is still, oh brother, where art thou?
Yes,
it's up there.
Yeah. I'll say when I went in, I went in kind of apprehensive, but wanting like, hey, this is Nolan. I'm not going in. We can talk about this, adaptations versus adaptations, right? I went in not expecting Homer's Odyssey. I went in expecting Nolan's Odyssey.
Yeah.
I went in expecting a Christopher Nolan film. It's like when you go to Batman Begins or The Dark Knight, you're like, okay, I'm expecting a Batman movie. Kind of. It was a Batman movie, but it's a Nolan movie.
Yeah.
Is Batman. And that's kind of how I felt about this going in. And so because I wasn't thinking we were going to get, I was actually surprised because I was under the impression that he was going to kind of demythologize it even more. I wasn't sure how supernatural he was going to get. And so when the Cyclops shows up and starts ripping heads off, it's okay, we're doing this. We're doing this. Okay. Well, wow. An actual monster on a Nolan film instead of like, oh, the Batmobile is a Humvee, tactical vehicle. Like, there's some of that. But so I was pleasantly surprised in certain ways. And as a film experience, it was a 10 out of 10. Like that is I want to go to the theater. I want to sit there and be immersed within this world.
Yeah.
That happened. And I
it
do
was a
think
long movie, but did not feel like one.
No.
I the depth, there was depth there. There was what I do think some of the misses for me. Actually, Anderson talked about this online. He quoted Aristotle's Poetics that the elevated style of diction was lacking. And I get it, modernizing, updating, but I think Tom Holland can say father instead of dad, stuff like that.
People still use that word. It's not another language.
Father. So stuff like that, and that's a fairly moderate take, I think. Overall, I enjoyed it. Overall, it's a Nolan film. It's not my favorite Nolan film. It's not my least. Actually, I think Tenet might be. I liked Tenet, but that was the sound experience was rough. But so all that to say, fairly, I'm squarely in the. I liked it. It was a good Nolan film. I'm glad I saw it. I think it is worth going to see in the theaters. I'm really glad of what it's done for having people go buy and read the Odyssey and go and buy movie tickets and experience them. And it really just highlights the importance of, at this point in time as a meta movie comment, the importance of directors even over actors is determined. If somebody I get excited about. I occasionally get excited about a Tom Cruise movie because, as crazy as he is, that guy knows how to pick fun movies. But for the most part, you're like Villeneuve, Nolan, whatever Eggers I can physically stand to watch. You're going in for a vision, and that's an interesting shift. I think over the years. So that's my basic take. I have other thoughts on the execution and what's he trying. The question I think is, what do you guys think he's trying to do with this adaptation? Right? What do you think he's trying to do? What's he trying to say? I mean, he's saying what he's trying to say, but I will say this as a comment to you, Brad. It is interesting. He makes so much subtext text, right? But it is astonishing, given that he does that, how bad people still are at reading what he's doing. There's this level at which I can't remember. I was reading some article about how certain kinds of readers, younger generation readers, have lost the capacity to read third person, like authorial intent and all that sort of thing. And just, it's got to all be first person, very clearly narrated and justified takes and so on and so forth. Whereas the capacity to interpret more subtle texts and more subtly thematic approaches to things is dissipating. And so you need him saying stuff like our age of bronze is breaking.
Is over.
It's over. Like that. Oh, so bad. But
they'll read again one day.
Yeah, they'll read again one day. Yeah, that was just a meta. That was funny. But that's actually, I don't know if that's just a Nolan thing or like will these people get it if I don't tell them thing. So
I think it's a Nolan thing. Just think of the monologue that closes The Dark Knight, but or the number of times in David Goyer's script in Batman Begins in the first 30 minutes that someone says fear or afraid. You just it's like just count it. See how quickly you get to 10. I want to add one more thing before we get to some of the thematic stuff, which is I think all of us are tempted to meta comment on the phenomenon of the movie, and Douthat, much belated ex-New York Times writer Ross Douthat, his take on the movie I thought was maybe slightly too harsh in its negativity, but his meta take was basically that the movie itself is a meta movie in that it underdetermines it's a text that everybody wants to claim and gets to claim, and right-wingers and left-wingers, MAGA and woke, I would just encourage listeners to go read it, because on one hand, he was disappointed, but in seeing the phenomenon of everyone trying to not just claim, but interpret and understand the movie in light of their own views of the world, he actually thinks that Nolan, in a sense, is a director for our time, because he gives these, it's like we get every 3 years, like a 3-week period of the monoculture that existed 70 years ago, and Nolan gives it to us, and we're all just like, this is amazing. We're all just like, I was on a walk in my neighborhood last night, just seeing people who I do not talk to movies about, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, did you see the Odyssey?" And wanting to talk about it. It's old, young, it's male, female. It's all the generations.
The Instagram reels.
There really is something like to celebrate, as you were saying, Derek. I mean, I'm a movie guy. I was a movie guy since I've always been. I mean, if I had not cared about like having a family or paying the bills, I wanted to go into film. I was a teen, checking movies off AFI's 100 list, and all the dark corners of the early like film internet. And I genuinely like, sincerely, no irony or asterisk. Like, I just love that every once in a while, this guy drops a cultural bomb on us, and we all get to share it together. And even if he comes up short in certain respects, I think it's a genuine model of what the aesthetic form of film can do, because I think film was built for popular art more than any other.
You talked about that.
That is worth celebrating.
You talked about that in your piece. Talked about it not being actually a highbrow art form, but an upper middle brow.
Yeah,
and I thought that was actually perceptive. You can have really smart films. The truly highbrow films, though, are. I get why they work. I understand why they're good. I don't enjoy them oftentimes. It's a thing. But this kind of thing. My upper register is Whit Stillman, but this kind of, we're going to make you think enough, an Interstellar or an Inception or whatever, but it's still, you've still got big explosions, and it's what is it? What did you say? Michael Bay with a master's degree? Is that like a bad way of putting it?
I didn't say that, but call that.
Did somebody say? Would you say no? But my point is that. But no, that's not a dig. I'm just trying to think of like. But he's still trying to do. He's dealing with elevated. He's dealing with elevated themes.
Yeah.
Right. That wasn't meant to be a mean comment, but I'm saying is.
Let's say Ridley Scott with a master's degree.
I like Ridley Scott as is.
Sure.
Right, yeah. dude. Man on Fire, Gladiator. Like,
sure.
They're gold, but
he doesn't have the master's degree. See Napoleon is not successful.
Yeah.
Alastair, what about you?
I think the larger cultural phenomenon, getting back to that point, it's amazing the difference between, you mentioned the Spider-Man movie, you might think of the Avatar movies that just sold so much.
Yeah.
In the way of tickets, and just no cultural impact. Hardly anyone remembers.
Nobody cares.
Movies. And yet, something like this does have that monocultural effect. And there's also something about this movie that I don't think Nolan was going for Homer's Odyssey so much as Nolan's Odyssey.
Yeah.
And this is a story that's been told in many forms over many centuries, and he gives us his take upon it. And for that reason, I don't think it's fairly compared to the original as if that's exactly what he was going for. At many points, I think he gives a divergence from what we would think of as the source material, but he's giving us his own telling of it. One thing I do find interesting is watching it, the use of time within a Nolan movie. It's often a common feature, the jumping around in time in something like Memento or Dunkirk. It's very common with the different timelines that are overlapping, or Inception. And this was like that with all the reminiscences and the nested narratives within the larger narrative and the various retrospectives and reminiscences. It's not always entirely clear where they fit in, nor whether the things that are being recounted are reliable, because many of them are happening on Calypso's island. It's not entirely clear. Are these actual memories of things that actually happened, or is this being imagined back into the past? You might also think about the beginning, where it's introduces in a time of apparent magic.
Yeah.
Is it as clear as all that just because we've seen the Cyclops in one scene, that this is in fact actually intended to be magic?
No, this is what I was going to ask you, because I initially went in with, I assumed we were going to get a Nolan, a disenchantment Nolan, in the same way that Batman was disenchanted, and so on and so forth. We're going to get some version of that. But then I guess
spinning top Nolan instead.
But we got that, and I wasn't initially as convinced. I thought, I was like, dude, the Cyclops is there. How's it real? There's a lot of stuff where I'm looking at it, it's like everybody being dead. He's eaten the lotus flowers, like he's gone for there's a lot of that stuff where this feels like some big catastrophes that, I mean, happened. And I was going for a more, hey, my initial take was, I think he went for a supernatural realism. Like, what would experiencing the gods feel like to an ancient person who actually, they thought the gods were real, right? They thought the gods were real. They thought they were in the oceans and in the seas and in the fields and all these sorts of things. And nevertheless, they're there and they're not, right? You see them and you don't. So I thought he was going for realism. I do see the spinning top interpretation a little bit more than I did before, especially just because of the opening quote, which I'd forgotten for most of it, was in a time of apparent magic, that sort of thing. So I don't know. I go back and forth. I still think this felt like a more supernatural realism thing. But, and in some interviews, he kind of said when it came to the interpretation of the gods, it's also hard to not do it without it looking goofy, right? You end up in like Moses and the gods of Egypt territory, or the
Clash of the Titans. Yeah.
It's hard to avoid that. And Zendaya was about the only way you could do that sort of thing. And even that, I don't even think I don't even think that interpretation, spoiler guys, was just a, oh man, he's traumatized. And so he's projecting that girl's face. It's also, it's very possible to read that as a, hey, Athena is adopting the face of one of her priestesses specifically to speak to him and do that in a way that's driving home the point. That fits really nicely within a supernaturalist frame. It doesn't have to be a disenchanted, traumatic take. Yeah. So that's kind of where I am at. I'm like probably 75-80% supernatural realism, but I can see the apparent take. I can see the spinning top, so to speak. What about you guys?
I have two thoughts there. One is that I think the apparent magic thing is basically Nolan's narrative cover for displaying things that may or may not be real. And then he does that via the memories of a traumatized soldier. I understand why he does it. I don't think he needed to, because people are coming to this story primed for Circe and the Cyclops and the giants and so on. And I think that, to me, that is Nolan when he's being too clever by half. Like, he just doesn't need it. Like, is the movie changed by dropping that card? No, it's not changed. And we don't need the possibility that it's only his memories rationalizing the loss of all of his men. It had to have been magic and the gods, right? I think he has made the text admit of that interpretation, but that interpretation is a lesser film, and it's not. And by and large, it's not the movie that he made. And second, I completely agree with you, Derek. And maybe this can lead us into talking about some of the themes. I think Zendaya is best interpreted as actually Athena, and Athena is taking the face of a victim. Yeah. And that's where, like, this movie, it's as if Christopher Nolan read Tom Holland's Dominion and then decided to Christianize the Odyssey. So who are the gods? Well, all the other gods are faceless and nameless and distant, and you never hear their voice. But the one god you see is the innocent woman you slaughtered. In the rage of Achilles, you slaughtered this innocent woman for no reason other than this random, wicked, despotic king's lust and and bloodlust. That's a powerful take in 2026 on one of the great founding texts of the West and of Greco-Roman civilization. My complaint is not that he Christianized it, and I reject approaches to criticizing the film that begin and end by saying it departs from Homer's original, right? Of course it does. It's an adaptation. To me, the question is, how well does he do it? What is he after, and what is the artistic result? And one of my two major criticisms is that he wants to have his cake and eat it too, and I just don't know if you can do that with this story. He keeps the catharsis of the homecoming slaughter, which we are all itching for in the seats, right?
It was pretty fun too. It was a good one.
At the 2 hour mark, 2 hour, 20 minutes, we're ready for it. But he also, with his what he gives with one hand, he takes away. And he says, but actually, this kind of violence commits the one who deals it out to self-exile, because when a civilization is built on this kind of violence, and this is very much a theme of the second and third Batman films as well, the scapegoat, the executioner of the violence has to be excluded. And that's a very interesting thought. But narratively, I think it fails for this story, because you need for Odysseus' story to work without major further restructuring or subversion. You can't have the violent catharsis cheering it on, father and son restored to the wife, and then we have to go into the West because this is no longer a land fit for a man such as I, even though you all needed me yesterday to wield the sword. So that was one of two things, or maybe three things, but that was one of the three misses for me that didn't work, although I appreciate as a Christian that he really was consciously or unconsciously Christianizing a fundamentally pagan story.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the comments over and over you've seen. This is a post-Christian film. This is the thing that happens after 2,000 years of Christian history and ethics. And when you start to think about pre-Christian Odysseus, had he just kept it, killing the 12 servant women and then, sleeping, willingly, joyfully sleeping with Calypso and Circe, et cetera. And, while Penelope keeps herself chaste and pure for 20 straight years, and all that sort of thing. People with fairly Christian sensibilities are looking like, she's there faithful to you, and you're just kind of doing this thing while they're waiting for you. We can't help but judge the ancient Greek texts by Christian standards.
But Derek, wouldn't it have been interesting, culturally speaking, for someone to make that movie and then to see how people reacted? That is an interesting proposition that would actually give us the counterfactual. Could people handle that? Or are they so post-Christian that everybody would just hate Odysseus?
Wait, I would actually, and I saw somebody post about that. I want people to make an absolutely true Odyssey or Iliad or whatever it is, and then just see people react and recognize the Greeks, the ancient people, they are foreign. They are they are foreign. You are no longer fully pagan, although we're paganizing again. You are a different kind of pagan now. And
Mere Orthodoxy is excited to announce that the Daily Liturgy podcast has joined our podcast network. The podcast is produced by our friends at Coram Deo Church in Omaha, Nebraska, and features prayers from the riches of the church, new written prayers, and daily scripture readings. We are integrating the Daily Liturgy throughout Mere Orthodoxy. You can receive the Daily Liturgy every morning on the Daily Liturgy podcast in written form through the Daily Liturgy newsletter and on our website. We've made it possible to use your preferred Bible translation and even switch to a Bible in 2 years plan on the web version while still integrating with the Daily Liturgy. We want to see every Christian grow in their devotion to Christ in Scripture and in prayer. We believe this daily resource can serve as an aid for individuals, families, and even entire churches who adopt it. You can start listening and reading by going to our website, mereorthodoxy.com, or clicking the link in the show notes.
All right. While we're talking about things that didn't work, Brad, you seem like you're pulling your punches on something. Go for just go for the jugular here.
Yeah, I'll go for the jugular. Here, I'll list both. One of them's a bit awkward to talk about. One is not at all. And these are, again, I think broadly speaking, although people are tussling over the movie, I do think that in many ways what Nolan was up to and some of these weaknesses are pretty well. I wouldn't call it a consensus, but I'm just wanting to make clear these are not original or unique to me. One is the character of Odysseus, and one is the presence, or rather the complete absence of sex, or even the hint of sex in the movie. So regarding Odysseus, like when Matt Damon was hired, I thought we were getting the talented Mr. Ripley or the informant. Mm-hmm. I thought we were getting a twisty wordsmith who could talk his way out of any situation, who thought up the trick of the Trojan horse. And we would see the fun Matt Damon, like the Martian Matt Damon, the one who always has a smirk and always, a version of Rounders Matt Damon, where you're not quite sure you can trust him. And that actually makes his journey back to Penelope interesting, because she is so fundamentally faithful. And like, you're not sure you can trust this guy. Does he even, like, what's he going to do when he gets back? Does he even want to stay married to this woman? Right? Like, the homecoming is ambiguous on both sides. He's testing her, and then she tests him. And Matt Damon would have been up for that job. And Christopher Nolan has had characters like that. He wrote the Joker, right? Like, he can write complex people, or right. Robert Oppenheimer, like, is in some respects this terrible, terrible human being, and in other respects this person with a deep moral conscience who regrets what he's done. And instead, we got effectively an unsmiling, one-note, traumatized soldier with PTSD, who even when he makes it home and exacts vengeance, doesn't even have like light in his eyes for his wife. Like, he just is like so lost in the clouds of his own abstract reflection on like a lost civilization, and all the crimes he's committed. And on paper, people have written books about the Odyssey and the Iliad, about the nature of war and trauma. That's interesting as a scholarly endeavor. For me, it just reduced Odysseus to a single note. And for one of the most interesting and complex characters in literature, that, like, if I'm his best friend or his wife who produces all his movies, I tell him, keep everything you're doing. It's gonna be a Nolan film, but just make him more like the Odysseus we know. Make him more like George Clooney in Oh Brother. Make him a little more mischievous, a little bit more like Loki, a little bit more trickster, and keep it all else. Even let him learn lessons by the end. And I think that also was that was a mistake. He doesn't have to be a different filmmaker to get Odysseus right. And I don't think he got Odysseus right.
I don't know. I feel like it's interesting. Yes, that would be a fun movie to watch in some ways. There's a sense in which the sweep of the whole movie is, he'd also just have to change the underlying themes. So I think Odysseus has to be that guy. If that central theme of Zeus's law and Xenia and all that sort of thing, if that's there, then the, like, kind of bouncy, playful, Odysseus can't be. It has to be.
In Nolan's telling, he learns his lesson on the first night of the sack of Troy. Maybe you have him learn his lesson with Nolan's Calypso, because by then he's lost everyone. But up until then, on all of the episodes when they're journeying inland, there's no banter with the Cyclops. He doesn't talk his way out of it. He just jabs his eye. That's actually dramatically less interesting. He becomes a kind of blunt force object rather than someone who always somehow wiles his way out of a situation, and in the book, of course, in the poem, into women's beds.
And this is the other part.
You just don't get the charisma, and I think something of the charisma needed to come through at some point in the film.
Yeah, and that's a whole. Yeah, he is Christianized in that way too, in the sense of like you forgive the Calypso interlude because like, well, man, that guy's blitzed out of his mind on lotus flowers. Like, guy doesn't even know what he's doing. It's all her
fault. He's not a willing.
He does like, yeah. And there's a sense that way you can be sympathetic for him, and happy for the reunion, because in a sense, he has been intentionally as faithful as Penelope has been. And it's not that there was no sex, actually. The only sex, though, that's depicted, it's not really depicted, but it's implied, is him with his wife. So, I mean, if you put my youth pastor hat on, college pastor, I think this is a moral improvement for Odysseus.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course it is.
He is far more worthy of emulation here.
But come on, we needed the tree bedroom. We needed at least get Nolan. You had $200 million. At least build it.
But again, there's this level at which once you start going into the more romantic, playful, et cetera, Odysseus, this again goes back to whether or not what we're really wanting is just Homer's Odysseus, a Homer's Odysseus movie, which is what it is, or a Nolan Odysseus movie, which is what we got. And I just don't think the sobriety or the severity or the moral weight, all of that's compromised to some degree if you've got playful seducer Odysseus.
Sure.
It just doesn't happen.
Sure.
So I don't know, it just then turns into fundamentally, did you want Homer's Odyssey or did you want Nolan's Odyssey? Because Nolan's Odysseus cannot be that guy. I know he can write certain guys, but like thinking about the heroes, Batman is not that. Even whatchamacallit, DiCaprio's character in Inception,
dead serious, traumatized by his lost wife,
dead serious, but like emotionally kind of still locked into her, like it. And even Oppenheimer, that romantic, whatever. We skip stuff and that kind of thing.
Sure,
but it's intrusive and weird. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
and because his characters, I don't know if this is a weird thing. His characters are fundamentally monogamous people.
Yeah, they are.
His heroes
outside of the Prestige, which in many respects, Samuel D. James on his Substack compared this film to the depiction of both some of the same themes, but especially like the treatment of gender and the moral losses or harms incurred by men seeking power. And I think that's his movie that by far, because none of his movies ever even touch it. Like, this is a man in many ways, if he's obsessed with time, he's also obsessed with Mars, but he doesn't know what to do with Venus. And no one on this podcast wants gratuitous sexual scenes in movies, much less Nolan. So I'm taking that as read.
None of us want that.
None of us want that. But you can depict, just like in literature, you can depict like
romantic realism.
An entire cinematic oeuvre, like an entire world that he has built for us for 2.5 decades that basically ignores one fundamental aspect of the human condition, does after like the umpteenth film, does like leave a part of the human condition unanalyzed. And the awkwardness and blatancy of it in Oppenheimer, because he could not depict a philandering historical character without actually depicting that, like, actually shows that I just think Nolan is squeamish about sex and he doesn't know what to say about it. And bracketing quote unquote sex scenes on film. The Prestige is his one movie where he shows two men treating a woman, Scarlett Johansson's character, as an object and passing her back and forth. And in their lust for power, they subordinate this woman to their own wills. And And I think, again, I'm granting, Derek, your point, it stands, that it would not be this version of Nolan's Odyssey. What I want to say is it could have been a Nolan film had he given us a twistier, and at least at first, less morally upright Odysseus. Because by the time we meet him on the island, by the time of the first night of the sack of Troy, he's already had his revelation. He's already realized that for 10 years, right, 9-10 years, like this was an error. And then for the next 10 years, he's the sad sack PTSD soldier, and then we get the catharsis at the end. And I think he could have done his shtick and not just been, slavishly beholden to Homer, while giving us a somewhat different Odysseus and a depiction of a world that includes the sexual aspects of the pagan world, or even the sexual aspects of just human beings, men and women. When it basically, like, it's like the thing you can't say on screen between him and Penelope, which is a very odd thing for the Odyssey.
Yeah, I mean, so that, and I think when you're saying sexual, sorry, this is a family podcast. We're talking about romance.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, right?
Yeah.
In the romantic dimension.
Yeah, or
between
just
men
Eros. Eros as an aspect of human life. Yeah.
Eros. So we're not just talking bodies in motion. We're talking generative tension and attraction and those sorts of things that, I mean, plenty of old movies had a lot of Eros and a lot of romance with zero depictions.
Exactly.
With zero amounts of skin, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and I get that. And that's a whole, but yeah, again, within the film, within the basic moral framework that he's creating, you can't have it, because he has to be a fundamentally faithful man who's fundamentally committed and monogamous and all those sorts of things. Because again, for all the talk about poly, for all the talk about all those sorts of things that happen in our culture right now, we've been fundamentally changed in that way overall about what we think constitutes a faithful man who, perseveres to the end. But that makes sense.
Make of on the subject of a sort of Christianization of the imagination, what do we make of the scene where he's talking to Penelope through the screen? Some have compared that to a confessional. It's very similar in its immediate appearance to a confessional screen. Is that intended to be an illusion, visual illusion to a confessional screen? It's where many of the deep psychological issues, the relationship with Athena as well, these things are played out there.
That's where he gets absolution from the goddess. I mean, if there was an interview that said, hey, I was doing a confessional scene, okay, yeah, it totally tracks, makes sense. I do think some of these things, I did read one interview where some of the stuff he was doing does not seem to have been conscious, right? I don't know that he was actually reflectively like, hey, I'm going to make a post-Christian film or something like that. I think he just is that. And I think that comes out in other films. So I actually think he's a thoughtful person who wrestles with these issues, but I don't necessarily know that it's conscious invocation all the time.
I didn't know until recently that he was raised Catholic, and that so he's got that in his childhood and his background. I mean, he's lapsed, but I think both of you are right, and it would be he's so enigmatic in the sense that like his films invite all this discussion, and then he does interviews and stuff. He's not a recluse. He's not Terrence Malick, but he doesn't want to answer every question, and I think sometimes he does have the master's degree, and he is thinking about these things. But I also think he's a little bit of an, like, the reason why he likes to explore time is because he also likes to explore the unconscious, and I think in a way he is a director of the unconscious, and if he ends up depicting the confessional screen without even realizing what he's doing, then all the better, right? He's drawing on this rich cultural heritage without always even meaning to. Now, he's on set with production designers, and someone's going to think of this, right? So it's hard to imagine he wasn't thinking it. But either way, it of course can be interpreted that way. I mean, speaking of connecting absolution to forgiveness of sin, I mean, going back on your language earlier, Derek,
and
I
to
think
Homecoming.
Nolan, yeah, and to Homecoming, good. I think Nolan is at the end of the day a chaste filmmaker, and for all that he rightly is celebrated or at least acknowledged as a director of spectacle, one of the things I wrote about that this film distilled for me is Nolan hates violence. He doesn't. If you compare a depiction of war, a scene of war from Ridley Scott's films, he wants you to see the knife touch the flesh, and he wants spurts of blood like Tarantino's Kill Bill. Like Ridley Scott, ever since Gladiator at least, he lives for that. He is not
Mel Gibson.
He is Mel Gibson. He is not criticizing these things. In a sense, he's glorying in it in a pagan way. And Nolan loves to cut before the knife gets to the throat. He has some blood. I mean, you can't not have it in the Sack of Troy, but he wants to show the big wide angle David Lean shot. He doesn't want to zoom in like Ridley Scott or Mel Gibson. He doesn't want Braveheart or Gladiator because he's worried that you will like the very thing that he is trying to criticize and hold up as bad. And in the same way that his characters and heroes realize that they may have been necessary blunt instruments, but what they did, they have to repent of, and the shape of their repentance is either exile or death. In the same way, Nolan, I think, has a guilty conscience. Like in the same way that Oppenheimer has a guilty conscience about building the bomb. And the reason why Nolan never shows, I mean, I think wisely at an artistic level, never shows the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima, etc., is that he's squeamish about it. He doesn't actually love the blood and guts, and he doesn't want you to like it too much. And I think that's an interesting moral perspective to bring on to bring to Homer. I mean, especially of course the Iliad, right? It's just one bloodlust scene after another, glorying over the corpse of someone else, and that's interesting morally. But for me, it ultimately, his version of that didn't quite work.
And certainly that final scene where you have the final part
showdown
of the movie where you have the suitors and the fight, it would seem it's the sort of time where you have the cathartic Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or Inglourious Basterds sort of Tarantino cathartic display of brutal violence against the adversaries. And he does not want that.
There's still it's the irony of him nevertheless being one of the best action directors of the last 20 years in terms of just, I mean, think of some of the sequences in the Batman movies and even this film and so on and so forth. They're not the crazy stylized, we're not talking John Wick territory.
No.
Nevertheless, I don't know how many reels I've seen with guys making jokes about, making the bowstring, thrum and saying, "Oh shoot, he's back." Right. Like when you're ready. And but that he actually knows how to depict that. That moment actually is not just a really cool throwaway thing. There is a presentiment of judgment that righteous vengeance is going to fall, that truth will be revealed, that things will be vindicated. Like he actually gets that impulse really well across several of the films, and it's that you're trying to think about that the wrestling of it. Like, how does a Christian who sees plenty in the Bible about God being a warrior and there being like a right time for judgment, a right time, but nevertheless delighting in bloodshed, that I think there's actually really Christian tension
I think you're right.
All of that.
I mean, Derek, think about his only war movie is the tale of his country's defeat at Dunkirk, right? It's a rescue operation because they're cornered and they can't fight anymore. And the classic image at the end of Tom Hardy's ship in flames, like that's the lasting image of the movie. It's good news because our boys got away, but like at that moment in time, it sure seems like Hitler's foot is on our neck. Like that's the story. He could have made any war movie, and it was about a kind of loss that turned into a victory, but that has little to know of the kind. It's not Saving Private Ryan. It's not the opening scene. It's not Normandy, with blood and guts and good guys and bad guys. The good guys are cornered, and they think that they're about to be humiliated when they come home. But what is felt as a loss turns out to be, in a sense, the great victory and turning point of the war. Like, I think there is something deeply, as you say, Christian about that tension, that he doesn't want to tell ordinary stories. Again, he takes the development of the bomb, which ends the war with Japan, as a kind of moral failure, right? Like, he wants viewers to feel that and not to glory in what might be told as a kind of triumph.
Guys, I think that kind of ambiguity is a good note to end our reflections on this ambiguous Odysseus and Nolan's work as a whole. Thanks for listening.
Is he ambiguous enough?
Or is he ambiguous enough? Who knows? We'll leave that top spinning for you as we close the show here. But thanks for the conversation, guys. And if you've listened thus far, thanks for continuing to listen. And please feel free to rate, review us on iTunes, Spotify. We just to let you know, we have a number of shows lined up. We're really excited about in the coming weeks. So stay tuned. But for now, this has been Mere Fidelity.